Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're stepping into a really fascinating period of American history, the presidency of John Adams.
The second president, following George Washington.
Exactly. Imagine that, taking the reins after someone like Washington. Adams faced, well, a unique set of challenges, as the still new nation tried to sort of solidify its place.
It really was more than just a succession, wasn't it? It was a critical phase of definition for the young republic.
And to help us navigate this, we've got a couple of interesting sources.
We do. We'll be looking at a White House biography and also a Vietnamese Wikipedia entry on Adams. It's intriguing to see how different sources, maybe with different focuses, approach this time period.
Yeah, combining them should give us a richer picture. The White House bio gives that concise American view, and the Wikipedia some different angles, maybe more on his background.
We'll see. Now, Adams, even before becoming president, he was absolutely central.
Oh, for sure. A Harvard-educated lawyer, deeply involved in the Patriot cause, a real driving force for independence.
Think about his roles in the Continental Congresses, his diplomatic work during the Revolutionary War. He was right there, in the thick of it.
And yet his time as vice president under Washington. It sounds like it was surprisingly frustrating for him.
It does. He actually wrote to his wife Abigail about it, called the vice presidency the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived.
Wow. Or his imagination conceived. Strong words.
Yeah, and he even acknowledged his own vigor, intellect, and vanity. So it really sets the stage, doesn't it? Here's a man with strong ideas, ready to lead.
Okay, so let's dive into his presidency itself. Our goal today really is to pull out the most important insights from these sources, give you a solid, clear understanding of Adams's time in charge.
So what were the immediate hurdles right when he took office?
Well, straight away, Adams was dealing with a really turbulent international scene.
Right, the war between France and Britain. That was causing big problems for American ships.
Huge problems. And at home, things weren't exactly calm either.
No, the country was already seeing these sharp partisan divisions. That unified spirit from the revolution was starting to fray a bit.
Let's zero in on that international situation first, especially with France. Our sources point to some pretty dramatic stuff happening there.
They really do. The French Directory, that's the government in France, after their revolution, they took a very unfriendly stance.
How unfriendly?
They actually refused to even receive the American envoy Adams sent, and they suspended commercial relations, just cut them off.
Wow. So what did Adams do? He wanted a diplomatic solution, right?
He did. He decided to send 3 commissioners over to France to try and sort things out.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The famous XYZ affair. Can you walk us through that? It sounds almost like a movie plot.
It kind of does. So the American commissioners get to France, and they're met by these agents acting for Talleyrand, the French foreign minister.
Okay.
And these agents basically said, point blank, negotiations won't even start unless you, the United States, pay a massive bribe.
A bribe? Just start talking.
A bribe, yeah, plus a loan to France. And they wanted Adams to formally apologize for some things he'd said earlier. It was pretty audacious.
I can only imagine the reaction. How did Adams handle that kind of insult?
Well, understandably, he was outraged. He reported the whole thing to Congress, and the Senate decided, let's make this public.
Good for them.
Yeah, but to protect the French agents' identities, they just labeled them X, Y, and Z in the release documents.
Yeah, hence the name XYZ affair.
Exactly. And when this news broke, it just ignited what people call the XYZ fever across the country. Public opinion swung hard against France.
And I bet that helped Adams's party, the Federalists.
Oh, definitely. Their popularity surged. This whole episode really brought home the challenges, of dealing with these established European powers. It forced the U.S. to think hard about protecting itself without getting dragged into a full war. Maybe set a precedent for being cautious about foreign entanglements.
So this foreign crisis really stirred things up domestically. What specific actions did the government take then?
Well, Congress reacted pretty strongly. They approved money for new naval frigates, more ships.
Building up the Navy.
Right. And they also authorized raising a provisional army, just in case. And importantly, this is also when the Alien and Sedition Acts were passed.
Ah, yes. The Alien and Sedition Acts. Still controversial today. What was the thinking behind them, and why did they cause such an uproar?
Well, the official line, the stated purpose, was to protect the nation from foreign agents causing trouble, and also to clamp down on what the Federalists saw as, seditious criticism from Republican newspapers.
Which were often very critical of Adams and the Federalists.
Exactly. But the Republicans, Jefferson's party, they saw these acts as a clear violation of basic rights. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press. They saw it as political oppression, pure and simple.
So a real clash over fundamental liberties.
Absolutely. And even though the acts didn't last long, they represent this really crucial early test of balancing national security against individual freedoms. It's a tension, that just keeps coming up in American history.
So things were hostile with France even without a formal war declaration. Our sources call it a quasi-war. What did that actually look like?
It was basically an undeclared naval war, fought mostly out in the Atlantic, the Caribbean. Initially, American merchant ships were really vulnerable. French privateers were causing a lot of damage.
That sounds serious.
It was. But by around 1800, the situation had started to turn. American merchant ships began arming themselves, and the newly beefed-up U.S. Navy started to patrol more effectively, protect shipping lanes. One source even mentions several brilliant naval victories for the U.S.
Okay, so some successes at sea. But it sounds like the overall mood, the sort of war fever, began to cool down.
It seems so. And what's really interesting here is Adams's role. He actually received word that France, under a new government by then, was also looking for a way out. They'd received an American envoy respectfully this time.
But wasn't there pressure to keep fighting, especially from within his own party?
Oh, huge pressure, especially from the Hamiltonian wing of the Federalists. They wanted a much tougher stance on France. They were furious with Adams for even considering peace talks.
So Adams went against them.
He did. He decided to pursue the chance for peace, setting another mission. It took long negotiations, but eventually it did end the quasi-war. It really shows his character, I think, willing to risk his own political standing for what he thought was right for the country. That takes some courage.
That decision must have had major political fallout for him, though.
It absolutely did. Sending that peace mission, as one source puts it, ignited the full fury of the Hamiltonians.
So his own party was deeply split.
Severely split. And that really weakened the Federalists going into the election as 1800. Meanwhile, the Republicans, under Jefferson, they were united, ran a very effective campaign.
And the result?
Adams lost to Jefferson. Though it's worth noting the electoral vote was actually pretty close.
Okay. So despite losing re-election, his presidency still had some significant moments, some milestones. What really stands out?
Well, one thing both sources mentioned, which is pretty neat, is that Adams was the first president to actually live in the White House.
Right, when the capital moved to Washington, D.C.
Exactly, in November 1800. And there's that famous prayer he supposedly made for the House.
Yeah.
May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. It's quite poignant, really. Speaks to his hopes for the nation's future.
It really does. And looking beyond just his presidency, both sources make a point of reminding us about his huge contributions before he even got to that office.
Oh, absolutely. You can't forget his commitment to legal principles.
Right.
I mean, defending those British soldiers after the Boston Massacre, that took guts, especially with public feeling running so high.
A real belief in the presumption of innocence.
Definitely. And then, being a delegate to the Continental Congress is a major voice pushing for revolution, helping draft the Declaration of Independence, arguing passionately for it.
He was everywhere.
And his diplomatic work in Europe, so crucial, helping negotiate the peace treaty with Britain, securing essential loans for the new government. And let's not forget the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. He was the principal author, and it really influenced the U.S. Constitution later on.
Plus, those 2 terms as vice president. Frustrating, maybe, but surely valuable experience.
No doubt. Gave him an inside look at how the executive branch worked, or was supposed to work.
The Vietnamese Wikipedia entry also flags something interesting he did right at the very end of his term.
Ah, yes, the Midnight Judges. It mentions he oversaw creating a new system of federal appellate courts and appointed a bunch of federal judges literally in the last days of his administration.
Trying to secure a Federalist judiciary.
That was likely the goal. But, as the entry also points out, the incoming Republican Congress basically nullified or got rid of many of those appointments pretty quickly.
So kind of a complex end to his presidency. What happened after he left office?
He retired, went back to his farm in Quincy, Massachusetts. And what's really remarkable, I think, is that in his later years, he reconnected with Thomas Jefferson.
His old friend and rival.
Exactly. They started this incredible correspondence that lasted for 14 years. Just fascinating letters. And then that almost unbelievable twist of fate.
They both died on the same day.
July 4th, 1826. the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, just hours apart. And Adams' last words, reportedly, were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." Though, unknown to Adams, Jefferson had actually passed away a few hours earlier.
Wow, that's incredible.
It really is. And, looking back, surveys of historians generally rank his administration pretty favorably, despite the controversies. And as the Vietnamese source notes, his family became this major political dynasty, the Adams political family, including his son, John Quincy Adams, who became the 6th president.
It's also interesting to get a glimpse into his early life, which that source details a bit. Born in Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1735.
Yeah, farming background. Though his mother came from a prominent medical family. His father sounds like a pillar of the community church, deacon, farmer, shoemaker, militia lieutenant, and really believed in education.
But Adams himself wasn't keen on school initially.
Apparently not. The entry says he was reluctant, even thought about being a farmer. It was his father who really pushed him towards Harvard.
And then the law career kicked off.
Right. And he quickly got involved in opposing British policies, like the Stamp Act. Moved to Boston in 1768, right into the heart of things. And then, as we mentioned, that principal defense of the British soldiers in 1770 after the Boston Massacre, that really tells you something about his commitment to the rule of law, even when it was deeply unpopular.
So wrapping up our deep dive on John Adams, it's clear he led the country through a really tough time. Big international problems, especially with France, and deep political fights at home.
Absolutely. A very complex period. And despite all the turmoil, the controversies like the Alien and Sedition Acts, Adams showed this consistent commitment to his principles, even when they weren't the popular thing to do.
Like handling the XYZ affair and then pushing for peace with France later on, even against parts of his own party.
Exactly. Those stand out as pretty powerful examples of his character, I think.
And it's so important, as you said, to remember all the groundwork he laid before the presidency, his dedication to the revolution, to setting up the government. It was a long career focused on the nation's founding ideals.
It really was. And reflecting on his presidency, it makes you think, those early struggles balancing national security and liberty, trying to find unity when politics are so divided, they still feel incredibly relevant today, don't they?
They really do. How do those challenges from Adams' time echo the complexities we're dealing with now? That's definitely something to mull over.